Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. In today's episode, we're very lucky to have a special guest on, and that's Bitcoin developer Jimmy Song. So thanks for coming on, Jimmy.
Thanks for having me.
Now, obviously, there's a lot going on in the Bitcoin space. Your speciality is what's going on under the hood from a technical level, I guess. So Segwit2x, you're probably one of the best people to talk to about all this. So, mate, do you want to talk about your background and how you got into Bitcoin and cryptocurrency before we dive into all the Segwit issues?
Sure. So I started in Bitcoin in 2011. I come from a background of doing just software development. I've been a programmer since I came out of college, and that was way back when. I've been a developer for like 20 years now. But basically, I got into Bitcoin in 2011 when I read about it on Slashdot. It was like it had broken $1 or something, and I really dug deep into it, and I found out about like the 21 million limit, and I was sold. I wanted to buy some, but at the time it was really annoying. It's not like today where you could just go to Coinbase, register, and buy with a credit card. Back then, you had to put money to Dwala, and they took like a week, and then move that coin to Mt. Gox, and then move dollars to Mt. Gox, and then buy it there. Anyway, it was too annoying, so I just sort of forgot about it and never finished that process until like much later when, you know, like things were happening with Mt. Gox, and I finally bought some towards the end of 2011. Yeah, well, when it went up to 30, I can't remember exactly when, but that's when I got into it. I actually didn't start coding in it until 2013, when some friends of mine were saying, "Get your money out of Mt. Gox," because that's where I had all my coins, and they were like, "Get it out right now." So I learned about wallets and all that stuff, and realized like the ecosystem wasn't sort of beyond my understanding, and that gave me enough confidence to program in it, and I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah, beautiful. So what does an average day sort of look like for you now, mate?
Well, I mean, I'm doing a ton of things right now, but mostly I do a lot of YouTube shows like this, or I don't know if you're on YouTube or some other channel, but yeah, I do a lot of shows. I write a lot. I present. I teach this course called Programming Blockchain. That's been a major focus. I consult for a bunch of different companies. Yeah, I do a lot of stuff. I don't really have, say, a typical day, but I do try to put in like 8 to 10 hours of solid work, some of which may even involve coding.
I think that's the beautiful part of this space, mate, that every day looks a little bit different for those of us that are trying to help spread the crypto world word. So let's dive into the hard fork. So I think most people now have got their head around basically what a hard fork is now that we've had, you know, some Ethereum forks, Bitcoin Cash, and now Bitcoin Gold. But this is definitely the most contentious one that we're coming up to. I guess the other ones have been slightly more independent projects branching off. You could describe them as that. This one, we certainly have a bit of a divide in the community, is that they both believe they're fulfilling Satoshi's vision, but the chain is going to split. Do you want to give a bit of an intro to that maybe, and how this is going to play out?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time coming, I think, and people have been disagreeing for many years now. So the fact that it's sort of coming to a head in a week and a half, actually it's like what, 8.5 days? It's kind of crazy, but yeah, it's coming up really, really soon. But I would describe it as sort of a difference of use cases, I would say. So there's a bunch of businesses that signed the New York agreement. I would say they're the major utilizers of the blockchain, right? Like they actually put the transactions in. And if you look at any particular business, they fill up a significant percentage of each block. And then there's this other side, they're what I would call holders, people that don't, care to increase the block space or reduce security in any way by having some sort of a hard fork. And there are sort of different visions of Bitcoin, right? Like on the one hand, you have a lot of businesses that want to expand their business. And, it makes perfect sense to me that all the people that signed the New York agreement are essentially businesses that want more throughput for their business, more revenue, more fees, whatever. And the people that don't are the holders. They don't need transactions that often necessarily, and it's a very sort of different paradigm. I have this in a future article that I want to write in like a few days, but I'll give it to you guys for free right now. But basically, I would say that one is sort of like an Austrian view of money, and the other is sort of like a Keynesian view of money. The Austrian view would be more that saving and storing wealth is the key to prosperity, and the Keynesian view would be that it's more about sort of the velocity of money, the capacity or the more transactions that happen. And this is something that people have been arguing about for like 100 years now. So it's kind of cool in a way that Bitcoin, being sort of like an economy of its own, gets to experiment and sort of show who's right. Because this is, people have been arguing about this like everywhere forever. So just
to cut you off a little bit there, Jimmy. Only a few hours ago, I interviewed Professor Steve Keen. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work, but So he's an economics professor, and he's very much talks about this debate and whether or not economic models we have work. And he was talking about Bitcoin and proof of work versus proof of stake. He wasn't really familiar with cryptocurrency. So that was a fascinating discussion I had with him yesterday. It's interesting that you say that again now, because we are very much experimenting with what is money. Should Bitcoin be a store of value or used for these transactions and all this sort of thing, and there's no right answer, and I guess that's why this debate is so contentious.
Yeah, and it's been true about economics forever. It's extremely hard to have sort of like a lab where you can test things out, but we may very well have that in cryptocurrency because it is sort of like a walled garden. It's a mini economy. It has all of the sort of traits of sort of a normal economy, except it's much smaller, so you can sort of test some of these theses out. And I'm hoping for a split, to be honest, because I want to see what happens, right? Like there are going to be people that are going to value sort of transaction throughput a lot more. And that's very much correlated with velocity of money. I mean, like having more transactions in a block is literally the speed limit right now for velocity of money. And then there are those that want to, store money and, see if savings is the key to prosperity and care much more about like the security of Bitcoin. So, on the one side, you have people that want to just get transactions through, don't care quite as much about the developer team that they're using. And on the other side, there are people that are much more concerned with storing their wealth properly, which would lead them to care about security and sort of sticking with the team that got them there. So they're competing visions of Bitcoin, and that's where we're sort of headed, and that's where we get to really see some resolution.
Exactly, mate. And I think that article you wrote a couple of days ago was just fantastic. I might put a link to that. Anyone that wants to know how this is going to play out has to read that article. You touch on game theory. Do you want to talk a little bit about that article and maybe what you're sort of leaning towards writing as well in the coming article? Because as you said in the pre-interview, there's just so many variables, and there's not one way that this can play out.
Yeah. So I mean, the article is going through sort of what might happen. Those tend to be sort of popular on my blog, I've noticed, so I wanted to write one for this. And I did the most basic analysis possible, which was, okay, what are the simplest scenarios that I can think of? And let's list them. One is, all right, all the 2x signers decide, you know what, we're going to abandon this agreement and we'll just go with the one chain as it exists. And that's a pretty easy scenario to analyze. It just continues as before and nothing really changes. And then the second simplest is sort of core capitulates. There's a lot of core developers that suddenly come out at the last minute and says, everyone should upgrade to 2x. It's a very, very unlikely scenario. And even if they said that, my conclusion there was that because it's so late in the game, it must be due, like many people would conclude it was due to coercion. Yeah. And my feeling is, someone would still mine one block on the original chain, which would cause a hard fork. And then I went into sort of like the third scenario, which I think is the most interesting, which is you take the signaling from the blocks that we've had, and just sort of pick a number in the middle. I said 90% mine 2x, 10% mine 1x. Yeah. And then you pick, the futures market prices and sort of see what the costs are for both parties. And I just sort of assume the static everything. And just a note, by the way, a lot of people are like, hey, you didn't analyze anything with Bitcoin Cash. I'm like, duh, yeah, I'm assuming everything to be static. Like, if you're on Bitcoin Cash, I'm going to assume you stay on Bitcoin Cash, not like sort of interfere. This is the most basic first order analysis possible. Yeah. So assuming that, it turns out that there's an opportunity cost for anyone mining 2x, and collectively they end up with about a $9 million opportunity cost per day. And that's not economically stable. That's not economically rational. It's not a market equilibrium. So something has to give. And I gave sort of 4 ways in which that equilibrium could be reached. One is price follows hash power, right? Like a lot of people sell their Bitcoin for 2x coin and sort of make the price equivalent to whatever the hash power split is. The second one is hash power follows price, which is miners move hash power to whatever is, to reflect the profitability. Third is a lot of money is injected. This isn't like a small amount of money. This is an enormous amount of money onto the Segwit2x part, just sort of outside money, outside the ecosystem. This is sort of one level of outside interference. And the fourth one is, massive hash power injection into the 1x. And this isn't a small amount either. It has to be an enormous amount, probably multiples of what exists right now. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just sort of giving people an idea of how unequal this situation is, and how something has to give. And that's sort of what I'm going to analyze in my next article.
So in a nutshell, and if you haven't read that article, 90%, just using a round number, of miners are saying that they're going to hard fork the network and support this 2x agreement. But in the Bitfinex and a few other futures markets we have now, they only are capturing 10% of the price or market cap. Now that can't give, that has to meet in the middle somewhere, as Jimmy's saying. And that's mainly because of the difficulty adjustment. So as you said, if we have 10-minute blocks at the moment and only 10% of the hash power stays on the legacy Bitcoin chain, that's going to mean the blocks go to 100 minutes, which it's just crazy to think about. If this played out, it only adjusts every 2 weeks. How many months did you work out it would take before, if nothing changed, before we'd be back to 10-minute blocks?
I think March 10th, so something like
6 months,
4 months. Yeah. So it would take a while to get to 10 minutes. But like I said, the economic incentives almost guarantee that won't happen. And that's sort of the caveat I put at the beginning of my article. I don't expect any 3 of these to happen. But it's sort of a nice exercise to give everybody sort of a base of a base to work from, and say, okay, well, this is often how game theory works, is that I see the potential moves that you can make, and then I react to those, and so on and so forth. So knowing that miners are going to have a $9 million a day opportunity cost, how is that going to be resolved? That's really going to be a major point of my second article, is how do you resolve this equilibrium? And honestly, one of them is going to be an attack, right? My hash power attack, and we'll see where that goes too.
Do you want to just quickly explain what a hash power attack is? For the majority of mining power can choose to attack the smaller chain with hash rate. Do you want to just explain that for people?
Yeah, so it's basically it's what's known in Bitcoin as a 51% attack, and they call it a 51% attack because with enough hash power, you can sort of privately mine blocks, maybe even empty blocks. And you can have a longer chain than what's out there in public. And you can release them at any time, sort of causing chaos to that system. If the mining hash power is very low on the minority chain, something like 10%, the majority chain can allocate something like 15%, right? Which is plenty to sort of overwhelm the 10% chain. Yeah. And sort of, privately mine a bunch of empty blocks and then release them to the minority chain whenever they choose, like say after 10 blocks. That's like 1,000 minutes. That ends up being almost a day, something like that. So like a whole day's worth of transactions are suddenly sort of thrust into the mempool, and people can attempt to double spend and things like that.
Yeah.
So it causes a lot of chaos. The one thing about an attack is that it does require at least 2/3 of the mining hash power. And this is where it gets interesting, because once you sort of, as a minority chain, once you get past the 33%, you're not as, I mean, they still can attack you, but then you get the option of counter-attacking, which becomes like this really weird, like crazy scenario. It's pretty much a scorched earth scenario. But any sort of attack, I think, at any stage is not really that easily predictable, because I mean, like, first of all, you're destroying the entire thing to some degree. If somebody can attack the minority chain, you at some point might be in a minority, and you just set a precedent for somebody attacking you. So that lowers the security properties of both chains.
Yeah.
But not only that, but like you need massive coordination for this to happen, because not only do you need the 12 to 15% or whatever that are attacking, but you also like need to make sure that the other like 65%, 75% of the hashing power aren't going to leave as a result of your belligerent move, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're like some coalition attacking some country, you better make sure that they're all okay with you attacking, right? Like this is why a lot of countries make alliances before they do attacks, because they don't want to get the others attacking them as a result. And so it's a huge coordination problem, and it turns out not to be so simple as, okay, let's just attack the minority chain and that's it. So that's something I'm going to explore in my article. So some other scenarios. I mean, Bitcoin Cash does come into play once, depending on like how price moves and things like that. And certainly for at least a little bit, they might pull away some hash power. And I think, we were talking a little bit earlier about sort of, Keynesian velocity of money being the key to monetary policy and things like that. And if that's the case, we would expect sort of Bitcoin Cash to go up and things like that. I mean, it's, again, like, we don't know very much. Economics isn't really a science, although with blockchains, maybe we can make it one. But like, we don't really have like, test beds to like work out our theses. We just sort of have an economy, and that's it.
Yeah, and I think the parity bug today is maybe going to scare a few people that might have otherwise moved into Ethereum that don't fully understand how this works. Obviously, if you understand how Ethereum works, it's not an issue for 99% of users. But I think today, watching Litecoin go up 20% over the past 24 hours is definitely one of those things that maybe we wouldn't have even considered a day or two ago, and now a big percentage of people are maybe parking in Litecoin. So we just never know exactly how these things are going to play out. But that point you made about if we have 10% and then 90%, and then we need 15% to attack that minority chain, that's really interesting, because the big pools that control maybe 10%, you're going to be able to name and shame them if they deliberately attack the smaller chain. And as I said, I think it doesn't sound like much, but I think it's still very hard to coordinate and do, as you said. So
yeah, I mean, not only that, but I mean, the minute you are a belligerent party, I mean, you sort of become a pariah in the community, right? Like who's going to be proud to be an attacker in this scenario? You need some really good justification for doing it. And typically in a war, that takes up most of the propaganda piece, right? Like the country needs to justify why it's going to war, and that's not easy. Even for a dictator to say, hey, you know what, you soldiers need to go in and like sacrifice yourselves. That's essentially what you're doing with the hash power that's going over, is saying you guys need to make your names mud for everybody else in order for us to advance our cause. What cause is that great that people are willing to risk that much? Yeah. I don't know, right? Like I mean, with war, at least, like, I don't know, maybe you're doing it for your family or something like that. Yeah, this isn't life or death. This is dollars and Bitcoin. It's like your reputation's like your reputation will be completely destroyed as a result of attacking, and you'll probably end up destroying the entire cryptocurrency economy to a large degree with an attack. But that said, even if an attack comes, I think there's no guarantee of success either. See, the thing is, you could say they do like a 10 block, like block withholding attack, something like that, right? Like, so the idea is, okay, you wait for you mine 11 blocks and you wait for 10 blocks to happen on the other chain, on the minority chain. And then you make 11 empty blocks and you release them as soon as that 10th block is found. That causes chaos, right? Like all of those transactions from those 10 blocks go back into the mempool. It's a massive block reorg. And probably some of the funds can be double spent if you're clever about it. If that happens, well, what's the other side going to do? They're going to say, well, this is clearly an attack. We're going to release software that's going to checkpoint the 10th block of the one that existed there before, and we're just going to reject this 11. Now you've just wasted all that hashing power. You've revealed that you're an attacker, and you've like strengthened the other side. There are going to be miners that are going to be like, what the hell? I didn't sign up for this. I'm going to go mine the other side. So like, I protect them, and I can become like their hero, right? Like if you're a miner on the 90% and that 90% attacks and you switch and turn around and help out the other side, you are going to be hailed as like the big savior, right? Like, so it's, this is not a game that that you should really play unless you know you're going to win, and it's not something that looks like is going to be easy to win, at least from my view. Even at 90-10 or even 95-5, it's so much coordination, so much cost, and it really is like a scorched earth scenario. Best case scenario, you depress everybody's price to 1/10 of what it was, and maybe you control it after about 6 months, like completely. But at that point, it's like, who wants to be in Bitcoin? I don't know. Like, there's no guarantee of price rise after that. They're going to be competitors to you that are, I mean, like, if that happens, I think that's like the death, nail in the coffin for like any sort of mining centralization. Everyone's going to go to some sort of GPU algorithm. People are going to like switch algorithms every few months so that they're completely ASIC resistant and stuff like that. So, I mean, they're like, this is not a scenario that I find that realistic, but it's something that a lot of people worry about. So I'll have to write about it. And I think I told you most of it, but yeah, that's the idea.
It definitely worries me a little bit how many people have got into this space over the past couple of months that have no idea about this stuff. I think you need to at least be aware of it, and that probably a good segue to the next point. Do you want to talk a little bit about replay protection, how this affects the average user if you're waiting to get your Bitcoins split on an exchange versus your own wallet, and those dangers of if you send them?
Yeah, I mean, for the average user, replay protection actually doesn't matter that much. And I say the average user as somebody like that maybe transacts like 4 or 5 times a year. And when they do transact, it's usually to an exchange or maybe a merchant or somebody that's relatively reputable or has a reputation to keep. And for those people, it doesn't matter that much. And I'll tell you why. If you send some Bitcoin, like let's just call them Fork A and Fork B. If you send some coins from Fork A over to an exchange, a merchant, or whoever, and you get replay attacked and it also sends Fork B, what do you think that business is going to do? They just received some Fork B coins that they shouldn't have received. Do you think they're just going to keep it? Well, if they did that for everybody, they're in for a class action lawsuit. And if they want to preserve their reputation, they're going to have to give it back to you. So it's not that big a deal. But if you're a business, it matters a ton. Why? Because if you send out Fork A coins to a user and you accidentally also send Fork B coins, do you think the user is going to give it back? Probably not, right? Like the user may even feign ignorance and say, I don't know about this coin. You can't prove that I received it. So in a way, it's sort of an asymmetric problem because it's mostly a problem for businesses. And we saw this when Ethereum had its fork.
Yeah.
Ethereum Classic, it was a big problem for Coinbase because they didn't think about replay protection at all. And a lot of people that withdrew Ethereum from Coinbase also got Ethereum Classic. And they lost a lot of money as a result. So what do you think all these exchanges, merchants, what do you think they're doing? Well, right now they're working on replay protection. They learned their lesson, right?
Yeah.
You lose a lot of money, you learn lessons pretty quickly. So really the only sort of instance in which it's going to hurt is if you're doing some sort of peer-to-peer transaction. So say I am sending you money and you are not my friend, we're sort of almost adversaries, and we do some swap of something. You're giving me maybe cash or something like that in exchange for my fork A coin.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, you might also get fork B coin. And then since I might never see you again, and we're sort of almost adversaries in this trade, then I'm kind of tough. Tough luck to me, right? Like if that's what happened. That said, it's not that difficult to replay protect yourself. So there will be, so first of all, exchanges are going to be on this, right? Like merchants are going to be on this.
Yeah.
If they're all going to send you what I would call replay protected coins.
Yeah.
Okay. And you'll probably be able to get some replay protected coins from faucets and things like that. Some people will be handing them out, and you don't need very much. You can have one Satoshi of replay protected coin. As long as it's in your transaction, it's replay protected. You can't replay it on the other side. Yeah. So I mean, I think these the easiest way, if you really want to split your coins, go buy $1 of replay, whatever coin, either fork A or fork B coin, from an exchange. Have them send it to your address, and then move all of your coins from all of your addresses to another single address. Now that's bad for privacy, but it will be split on the chain that you just got the replay protected coins from. And once that transaction goes in, you can spend on either chain to your heart's content.
Yeah.
And if you want to be more like privacy centric, you would need like $1 for every address that you have, and you'd have to move every address on its own. And you'd need something called coin control as part of your wallet to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are some easy ways. I really don't think it's as big a deal as people make it out to be.
Yeah.
And I'd rather have wallets that have features like coin control built in than sort of like relying on everybody to be nice.
So look out for wallets that are going to have coin control. If not, as Jimmy said, as long as you've got one Satoshi of Bitcoin that does have that replay protection, the way that Bitcoin input and outputs are created, that's going to mix them together and not allow that Bitcoin transaction to be double spent. So that's good advice there, Jimmy. We've been pretty doom and gloom, mate. So do you want to maybe we'll end on a good note of where we see Bitcoin going on the next 12 months or 5 to 10 years, if all goes well, even if we have 2 more Bitcoins that are able to do their individual projects or needs they're trying to cater for, however you want to describe it, where could this go in the future in your eyes?
Well, so first of all, I don't see these hard forks as negative at all. I actually think they're really good for the system. And I've said this before, but basically, Bitcoin has an anti-fragile quality, right? Like when Bitcoin Cash hard forked off the network, we saw a huge price rise. Before it was like 2,700, we're now at like 7,000. It's by any measure, Bitcoin has done much better as a result of that hard fork. Yeah. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about why that was. And my conclusion has been it's anti-fragile because of the entire ecosystem, right? If you think about it, that hard fork caused everybody to sort of scramble and create a lot of sort of security practices and things around Bitcoin. Yeah. And not just core devs or whatever, but like wallet developers had to write all this like code to split it. Exchanges had to harden themselves against, basically have some way to distribute those coins. So they have processes in place now. And that as a whole, as an ecosystem, that makes Bitcoin a better store of value, and that increases the security. That creates an upward pressure on price, and that makes sense to me, right? Like it's not just like code. Like Bitcoin is much more than code. It's an ecosystem of developers. It's an ecosystem of holders and traders, and it's also a social community as well. That's also anti-fragile. And all of those things increase with every sort of like disordering event that happens. And hard forks, almost by definition, are disordering events. And I see them as a good thing. And the way I see it, the next year or so, we're going to have a lot more hard forks. So 2018, I am predicting it to be the year of hard forks. And there are some really good reasons for that. First of all, like unlike an ICO, which you have to pump and market and like do all these things to get people's interest, you know, with a Bitcoin hard fork, everyone automatically sort of gets it, right? Like they already have fair distribution because you just give it to current Bitcoin holders, and they have sort of like this in with the fiduciary duty that almost everyone has, that allows them to get it listed on exchanges without that much work. I mean, think about Bitcoin Gold. They put in almost no marketing at all. And yet here we are sitting talking about it because everyone that owns Bitcoin is going to own Bitcoin Gold. That is going to be a powerful way for a lot of people to launch all these hard forks. And that for that reason, I think, and because, you know, you get, you know, free Bitcoin Gold if you had it at block whatever, and you get free Segwit2x if you had it at whatever block, that's just going to continue being the case. And if you saw Ethereum, it pumped because of all the ICOs coming in this year, large part. People wanted to get in on the ICOs. The only way was to buy Ethereum, so they bought Ethereum to do that. I see sort of the same dynamic happening in Bitcoin over the next year. There are going to be a lot of people buying Bitcoin just so they can get all these free hard fork coins. And that's a powerful motivation, man. And I don't know if it'll do the same thing to the price, but at the very least, that's going to put an upward pressure on Bitcoin. That said, it's not all good news in the sense that, you know, like a lot of scammers and sort of Ponzi schemers that used to be in Bitcoin, they did leave for, you know, greener pastures and like altcoins and ICOs and things like that. Well, they're all going to come back too. So it's not all good news, but I mostly see hard forks as a massive positive, and I don't think it's played out at all. I think it's going to go for at least like 6 months.
It's very interesting you say that. Even if it's just a $50, $20, $30 coin, if you're getting a little dividend or stock split each month, however you want to think about it, that's I could see a big run up in price, as you're saying, just for that, let alone if we keep getting more mainstream awareness and mass adoption. So plenty of positives on the horizon still once we get past this in the next week or two. So Jimmy, it's been a fascinating conversation, mate. I really appreciate you taking the time. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers, man.